Yes, I really did buy this 2005 Smart ForTwo pretty much for the sole purpose of using it in the Smart vs. WeGo video as a prop. Now it has electrical problems and I don't know what to do with it. I first saw this car in June of last year sitting on the lot of unnamed used car dealership. It was sitting on the lot with a brightly written price on the windshield of $44.50. When I saw this car there, I was driving the WeGo at the time and I got rather excited, so as soon as they were open next, I called them and said, "Hey, I have the Chinese knockoff of this car. Can I use it in a YouTube video? I just need to borrow it for like a day." And they said, "Yeah, sure, you can use it in your YouTube video, as long as we haven't sold it by the time you get to it." Should have drawn up suspicion there. So they told me to call the next Saturday morning when I was available and see if the car was also available. So I called them that Saturday morning and surprise, surprise, they said they had sold it to a guy in Colorado and I couldn't use it in the video because the car didn't belong to the dealership anymore. Darn the luck. Skip ahead several months and I happened to see this exact same car on the lot of a different branch of the same used car dealership. Clearly they had never actually sold the car like they told me. Whatever. And this time, for whatever reason, they had dropped the asking price, written brightly on the windshield, to just $26.50, nearly half the original asking price. So this time, intrigued by the new lower price, I went inside the dealership to talk face to face with a real person. Given my last experience, I knew they weren't going to let me just borrow the car, so this time I was more investigating the new low price. And when I asked about the new low price, they told me it was because of two reasons. This is four. It's because of two reasons. One is because they had tons of interest from people out of state and they were unwilling to ship anything. That sounded odd. And two, the most worrying, is it had an easy to fix electrical issue. Obviously, it was the electrical issue that I was most concerned about, but the salesman assured me, out of blatant ignorance, that the issue was easy to rectify. He claimed it had a frayed spark plug wire and the car didn't start misbehaving electrically until the previous owner drove it in the rain. Now this explanation sounded like utter baloney to me, so being the careful, discerning buyer I am, I walked away. To get into my car to go back home to grab the trailer to trailer home the new car I had just bought. Yeah, I negotiated the price down to $2,300. Who's a shrewd negotiator now, Ed Bullion? Yeah, this guy. I figured the price was low enough that I would have enough wiggle room to make repairs on the car and then sell it for enough money extra to pay back the repairs or maybe even make a tiny profit. Plus, the car was too similar to the WeGo to pass up any opportunity at all to use it in a video. At this point, I'm sure you're wondering how that electrical issue turned out. Well, as it turns out, the sales guy was right. It does have a frayed spark plug wire, and the electrical system does misbehave in the rain, or the sun, or when any weather is present at all. I'll describe it more in a second. The car had some other problems off the lot, including not one, but two broken door handles. The cable had snapped in both door handles. Now, they weren't hard to fix, but I did have to crawl through the hatch to open the doors from the inside until they were fixed. And because this dealership employs an open door policy for all of its cars, that meant the doors were open and everything loose in the car had to been stolen. The jack, the tow hook, etc., all gone. Thankfully, the door handles on the car broke before someone decided to steal the carpets or the seats or something. The car inspections, though, is where things get a little more interesting. First, it failed a safety inspection because it had a couple of bald tires and a brake light that was out. So I got a brand new set of Continental tires to match the car's bizarro staggered stance and a new brake blub. This set me back about $700, which is a lot, but it's okay considering that if this car can be sold on for market value, I was still in the green. And then I had the emissions inspection. Missouri requires emissions inspection in just 4 counties around the St. Louis area, one of which I happen to live in. All they do is they take this stupid little OBD2 scanner tool, plug it into your car, make sure your car doesn't have any check engine lights on, and then charge you $20. Well, my smart car failed this emissions inspection because the computer had reset itself too recently and didn't have any accurate readings, but I didn't care about that whatsoever because the emissions scanner tool made my odometer jump forward 13,000 miles. When I went into the inspection, the car read 67,000 miles, and when I came out, it read 80,000 miles. And now it's time to tell you about the main electrical issue with the car. What happens is the entire electrical system, including the engine, will just cut out randomly. The display flashes off and then it comes back on with every light on the dash on and things blinking and beeping, and I have to wait for the computer to reboot itself before I can do absolutely anything, including starting the engine and getting out of people's way. What's curious about this issue is that it only seems to happen when I'm stopped or approaching a stop. It's never seemed to happen while I'm driving, which is good. And it also happens very frequently. In fact, it happens so frequently I should be able to capture a demonstration of it happening on video. What's good is that the car otherwise seems to be perfectly fine and functional, and you'd have no indication that it had some sort of weird electrical issue. By the way, after it failed the emissions test, I went to the license bureau to get a temp tag for the car so I could drive it around legally for 30 days. Unfortunately, I left it parked most of the time because what would happen is the electrical system would cut out, usually at a stoplight while I'm sitting there just before the light turned green. And this would annoy everyone behind me because I would have to wait for the computer to reboot for what seemed like 5 years before I could start the car up and get out of their way. In an attempt to try to figure out what was wrong with the Smart's electrical system, I trailered it up to the local Mercedes dealership so they could plug it into their Star diagnostic system and hopefully get a better reading. Well, they did that and they said, "We have no idea what's wrong with your smart car because its computer won't communicate properly with our Star diagnostic system." And then they charged me $170. They did, however, shoot me a quote for the installation of a new SAM unit, which is the Smart's internal computer system, that they said would most likely fix the issue. Now that quote was $1,700, including labor. And I ain't paying no $1,700 for a maybe fix. So I drove the car back up to the trailer, trailered it home, and here it sits, completely unchanged. And now I don't really know what to do with this car. I've taken it off insurance, so it's not costing me anything to just store it, which is something. I do sort of want to check out the relays and other connections and do some other DIY diagnostics, but between making these YouTube videos, other projects, and really just a lack of motivation for this car, I haven't really found the time to do that, nor do I ever think I will find the time to do that. I sort of just want to pay the dealership to install the new SAM unit and be done with it, but that would immediately blow my budget. It would sort of feel like giving up, even though I've already done so mentally on the car. And there's also the possibility that it wouldn't fix my issue, which means I would be $1,700 in the hole for nothing. And that would be the absolute worst possible outcome. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are readying advice for me in the comments below, but until I read that advice from the many helpful people that are out there, I'm going to list this car on Craigslist in its current state. Craigslist is always entertaining. I've linked my brutally honest Craigslist ad in the description below if you care to have a read of it. I'm doing it more for entertainment than anything. And that's enough of my whining for now. Let me tell you about the actual car. Now, I already gave a brief introduction to this car in the Smart vs. WeGo video, so I won't repeat anything I said in there. Now I want to tell you more about the car while driving it, but as I mentioned earlier, it's neither licensed nor insured, so I can't really do that. But what I can do is give you a very special kind of test drive. Now that we're on the road, if there's two things you need to know about this car, it's that it's quite spacious on the inside despite outward appearances, and the transmission is awful. I touched on this in the last video, but it's worth repeating. The transmission in this car is a computer-operated 6-speed manual. What that means is it does the clutchificating and gear changing for you, and all you have to do is modulate the throttly bits and tell it what gear to be in. Or if you don't feel like telling it what gear to be in, you can always pick the automatic mode and it'll pick it for, oh my god, it's a deer. The problem is that it works so poorly. Each gear change takes about 3 seconds and you can just feel the computer slipping the clutch between every single gear change in an awful attempt to make the gear changes smooth. Downshifting is even worse because it relies more heavily on clutch slippage than it does engine rev matching to make the downshift smooth. All I want to do when this transmission operates is take over manual control, but unfortunately I can't do that because at some point Smart decided that a couple of mentally handicapped solenoids could handle the job better than I can, which they can't. Transmission aside, this car is actually a little bit of fun to drive. It's rear engined and rear wheel drive, so you have a little 3-cylinder turbocharged engine making all the right noises behind your head. Oh my god, a turkey! Where does all this wildlife keep coming from? Anyway, it also has this lovely manual steering rack, which gives me all the feedback I need without any of the filtering that comes from power steering. Frankly, this car doesn't need power steering anyway because it has no weight up front. Now, obviously, given the shape and weight distribution of this car, it's not going to handle well, but at low speeds, it feels quite engaging and fun. Now, let's merge onto the highway. Unfortunately, when you get it up to highway speeds, it does start to feel a little bit skittish and underpowered, but that's not at all the point of this car. This car was designed to buzz around tiny little city streets with the greatest of ease, and it does that very well. Now, obviously, this car won't work in St. Louis because it's not bulletproof, but it should work in other cities just fine. That's enough information about the car for now. I'm not here to make a full review. Now, buying this car may have been a bit of a mistake, but at least it wasn't a huge investment, and I did get to make that video I've been wanting to make for quite some time, and this video, so that's pretty cool. If any of you have any suggestions or advice regarding my electrical cutout issue, please don't hesitate to let me know. That is, unless you're just randomly guessing. That's usually not very helpful. And lastly, before I go, buying this smart car was a dumb decision. There, I made your dumb joke.